everyone, good afternoon, good evening, or good morning, depending on where you're coming from. You're all very, very welcome to this afternoon's event, the No Code Effect Construction and Manufacturing Edition, brought to you by Kibana Technologies, the most flexible no-code application development and process automation platform. So you're all very welcome, and welcome, of course, to AirMeet. I'm going to run through a little bit of housekeeping, and I see that you've all joined today, and from people from all over, and I see a few chats coming through, so keep the chats going. The chat box is on the right-hand side of the screen on your desktop, and as you can see when you joined in, there are tables in the lounge, and you can go and join a table and go and talk to some of the other attendees. When the conference is finished up, you can go back there and chat again, or click to try out the speed networking option. So this is new, maybe new to a few people. If you haven't used AirMeet before, but you've used Zoom or Teams, the system works just the same, just that we have the lobby, which makes things a little bit easier to use. So to tell you just a few of the things that we're going to try and do to make this as interactive as possible, we have a chat room for the general chat. As I mentioned, you'll see this on the right-hand side of your screen. The tabs there are chats and Q&A and the polls. So the chats are for the general chat. The Q&A is where we would love you to put some questions to our speakers today. So feel free to click on the tab there and pop in a few questions. I'll also be popping up a few polls as we go through the afternoon. And the poll tab then is where we would love you to go to fill in your answers. So you can actually send messages to people who are here too. If you spot somebody you recognize, or some of the speakers have said something that you'd like to talk to them directly, you can look up the attendees and send them a message, and there'll be some alerts popping up as well, reminding you about some of the polls that we've run throughout the session. So as I mentioned, you'll find that poll section there in the third tab. So we have a few more joining us, but I'll pop up the first poll just to settle us in. Bear with me one moment. And here we go. I'll put this forward to the screen. And just a simple question. What's the best way to describe your role? So again, you'll find that in the third tab there as we go through. So we have a jam-packed session with some amazing speakers from all around the world, and you're going to get a chance to interact with them, some questions throughout the sessions. So as I mentioned, please use the chat, please use the Q&A, and please enter into the polls as well. So now, back to why we're here. We're here at the No Code Effect Construction and Manufacturing Edition. So firstly, let me welcome Osvaldo Souza, co-founder and CEO of Kibana Technologies. Osvaldo, welcome.
Fantastic, Tracy. Thank you so much for this introduction. And hi everyone. It's great to be here today. I have the opportunity today to talk about how no-code, low-code solutions can enable construction and manufacturing industries to accelerate and simplify their digital journey. I can't wait to hear all about all the sessions, all the great speakers that we have today. But before we move to that, I would like to share with you again some good news that we have here from Kibana. So early this week, we announced that we at Kibana have raised 1.5 million euros from Kernel Capital and Enterprise Ireland. This is an important and a great milestone for us. We will be able to use this funding to expand our team, platform, and effectively this is the beginning of a new stage for us. You're muted, Tracy.
My first faux pas of the afternoon. Hopefully that will be the last one. I was giving you loads of credit there, Osvaldo, saying that we're delighted to see the feedback that that news has received so far. So congratulations and well done on that milestone. So
that is really for everyone in the team. In fact, it's a great milestone for all of us, really.
Yeah. So tell me, We're looking forward to some of the speakers coming up shortly. Would you like to give us an overview on what's coming up for the afternoon?
So for this afternoon, we will be having a session with Dr. Noel Carroll. So he will go through the human side of digitalization. Following that, we will have Avril that will come and talk about digital transformation of the Irish construction sector. Following that, me and Chris will go into a session, so a fireside type of session where we will talk about real life usage of Kibana in ArtMac, and also I will have the opportunity to demonstrate or show what this is all about. So there is a lot of aura around that, but we would like to make that a bit more clear and real to people in that session. Then we will go into the next session will be about driving transparency in construction by leveraging digital tools, and then we will finish afterwards.
Brilliant. So we have a packed afternoon. So thank you, Osvaldo, for that, and I know we'll be hearing more from you in the afternoon. So I guess, wow, it is the best way to set the scene, with Gartner predicting that no-code and low-code application building will gather more than 65% of all app development functions by the year 2024. And with about 66% of big companies using a minimum of 4 low-code platforms, I think no-code has definitely got a few of us sitting up in our seats. So let's get started. We have a jam-packed schedule, as we've said, and let me welcome Noel Carroll there to the stage. Dr. Noel Carroll is the founder of Citizen Development Lab at NUI Galway. He's the Associate Head of Learning, Teaching and Assessment in the School of Business and Economics. And he's also the Programme Director for the MSc in Information Systems Management, a lecturer in Business Information Systems, and a researcher with LERO, the SFI Research Centre for Software, and the Whitaker Institute at NUI Galway. His research interests include seeking ways to support organisations in developing transformation strategies. So today, Noel is going to talk about the current research on the importance of normalising a digital culture in order to sustain it, and how citizen development is an excellent method to embed this process. So welcome, Noel. I'll hand over to you there.
Thank you very much, Tracy. Can you see my screen?
We can.
Oh, that's great. Thank you very much for the invitation to present at this session this afternoon. So my name is Noel Carroll. I'm based here in NUI Galway. Much of my research has focused around the process of digital transformation, and I'm particularly interested in the human side as part of that. So over the next couple of minutes, I hope to present an overview in terms of how you begin to normalize that digital culture in your firm. Just by way of quick overview, I suppose it's important maybe to think about the evolving digital landscape. So much of my research kind of has focused on how organizations are grappling with trying to keep up with advancements in technology. So, for example, a couple of years back, massive focus on cloud computing. Then there's a lot of attention on data science, on data analytics. And in more recent times, we're beginning to see continued focus on AI, the whole area of artificial intelligence. So for me, I began to query the challenge that organizations are actually going through in terms of trying to keep up with this moving target across the marketplace. So trying to future-proof and strategize for the future, investing in technology, and it's constantly moving at such a pace that is quite challenging to keep up with. And then on the flip side, in terms of digital transformation and the research that we've been doing there, we began to see that there's quite a high failure rate. It's estimated that about 70% of digital transformations fail. So from my perspective, I was quite interested in learning more about the transformation process, like regardless of the digital technology, and I began to question what's actually happening in this whole transformation process. how do we lift the hood on the transformation and examine what's happening in this black box? Well, it turns out there's a real lack of research around the transformation process, and there's quite a lot of focus on the digital side. And this is where I think the beauty of citizen development as a method, as a philosophy, as a cultural perspective on organizations actually plays a key role to empower end users to have a stakehold in the transformation process. When I try to explain this to our students at undergraduate and postgraduate level, I often describe how the evolution of technology forces us, in our roles in organizations to try to keep up with the pace of technology. So we know from centuries as such that there's a core kind of, I suppose, balance between the people, the process and technology. And this has gone back to like even caveman stuff. And as the evolution of technology grows, this is really important to try to sustain that balance between the human side, the process, and the technology or the platform, for example. So students who have grown up as digital natives often struggle with appreciating the evolution of technology and how that has forced us to change as team members, how it's changed organizations to look at ways to get that competitive edge. And I often use this clip, which I'm about to share with you, to try to use as an analogy around digital transformation and how the role of technology has forced us to change how we view teams and the role of teams. So hopefully this will play and the analogy will make sense in a little bit.
But Holland comes in for a pit stop. Time to refuel and change tires. Lou Moore himself changes the tires. Only 4 crew members, including the driver, are allowed to work on the car. It's a tense time. Holland stays in his seat, anxious to get away. Let's watch. The tires are changed at last. A crewman polishes the windshield as Holland moves away just 67 seconds after he stopped.
So I think the key takeaway from that is as technology begins to evolve, so too does the actual dynamics across the teams that actually support organizations to try to get that competitive edge. We're all looking for that marginal gain to try to beat competitors and so on. And this is where I think, again, citizen development, platforms like Yanja plays a critical role to try and provide that competitive edge over kind of digital transformation efforts. The key thing also, when we begin to look at how to normalize the kind of digital culture that exists, we begin to look at, can we lift the hood on the transformation process? And I began looking at, I suppose, theoretical frameworks and lenses to identify how we can envisage the normalization process. How do you really embed that kind of digital transformation within organizations? And this approach of normalization process theory, it allows us to focus on the implementation, the embedding, integration of new technologies and organizational innovations. So specifically, the gray boxes there, in the diagram, there are 4 core constructs. And the idea behind this is that we begin now to really address the transformation process. It's not something that's magical in the black box. We actually, I suppose, begin to dissect exactly what we mean by the transformation process. And the very first kind of building block there is coherence. And that encourages us to have conversations, I suppose, with practitioners to ask, what is it that you do at the moment in terms of, the current practice within your organization? And what is the rationale or the motivation to change? What is the reason that you want to actually undergo a digital transformation? And that's often a stumbling block for some, because they actually want to chase the next piece of technology. So if it's AI or if it's blockchain or whatever that might be, there's kind of a tendency to kind of follow evolving markets. When you break it down to actually uncover what is the rationale for it, can often uncover new truths across the organization. If you actually identify the rationale for change and so on, that moves us over then to the second building block of cognitive participation. It allows us to examine what is the new roles, the new responsibilities that you've assigned to actually meet the new expectations that you've set out as part of the transformation process. Then the third phase looks like collective action, where it begins to say, right, now that you've got the rationale or the motivation, you've got the people who'd like to buy into this change, and now you've got, I suppose, the technology of the platform, let's say, like the Kibana. How do you now align that with existing practices within the organization? How do you ensure that encourages new kind of skill sets? How do you ensure that the transformation has a ripple effect across the organization to such a point that you're beginning to see change in organizational structures, the social norms, you're beginning to see kind of changes in the relational work that people do, and also the group processes and conventions within the organization. Because if you don't actually witness the changes here at this point, we must begin to question what is the impact of the transformation. And we often find, and it sort of reminds me of a quote I heard some time back around how all these digital transformations often sit on PowerPoint decks in executive offices. They don't actually make it to the shop floor. So this is where we begin to kind of, I suppose, question what is the impact or what is the operationalized view of the transformation. And the final box there looks at reflective monitoring, where we begin to ask individuals or groups or even all these various stakeholders across the organization, what is the impact of this change or this kind of digital transformation on you as an individual, as a group, or an organization? And how can that be evidenced by change in structure and social norms and everything else? And this really opens up a discussion around the value of the transformation process. And just very quickly then, we'd often you try to run an analysis, I suppose this is the very high level, but if we were to look at coherence, for example, cognitive participation, collective action, we can see this organizational context that there's a lack of insight in terms of the rationale for change. So we'd often ask, like for example, software developers, do you understand the need for change or the rationale for change? And there's a survey instrument behind this. But you could actually investigate if there's an awareness across your organization for the need for change or what actually the transformation plan is, and cognitive participation, if there's a real sense of buy-in to that change and so on. And in this case, you can see there's a huge emphasis on analytics and metrics around change and transformation, but there's a really lack of insight in terms of how that's been embedded, how people understand the change, the transformation, and so on. So this is most likely to lead to an unsuccessful kind of transformation because people don't understand the need for it or don't buy into it. But yet we spend a lot of time measuring that change, if that makes sense. So that's kind of I suppose, a quick overview in terms of the value of normalization process theory and some of the work that we can do and you have been doing with organizations. So just, I'm conscious of time, so just, if anybody has any questions on this or wants to kind of reach out to me, I'm happy to take any questions and I welcome an opportunity to collaborate with organizations out there. You can reach me on email or I kind of dabble in social media sometimes. Thank you.
Brilliant, thank you for that, Noel. There's a lot there. I suppose we are a little bit tight on time, so if I was to ask you just one question in terms of the challenges, Noel, for organizations that are examining the digital transformation black box, what would you say for that?
Yes, so some of the challenges that we are beginning to see is that they are so, I suppose, heavily invested in the technology perspective that you often struggle with actually trying to communicate the rationale for change and bringing everybody within the organization on the same kind of journey. So this is where I think the likes of citizen development and the work that you guys at Kibana are doing really plays a fundamental role to empower the end user and bring everybody on the same journey.
Yeah, that's great. There's a lot there.
Yeah.
I'm sure that with Noel, that you have had a lot there, and I know that Team Kibana can, of course, help with empowering people and organisations to deliver this. But many people will probably want to reach out to you directly as well too afterwards if they're looking to see about how they can collaborate with you as well too on research development. So I'm sure your details are there as well too for people to reach out to you.
Yeah, I welcome any collaboration. Thank you.
Fantastic. Okay, thank you, Noel. As I said, I'm sure we'll have many questions on this, and I know that you have to run, but we'll continue to take any questions, and we'll send them on to you. So thank you again, Noel. Thank you for your time. Okay, so we're going to pop up another few polls there. So there's another poll there for your attention while we're bringing in Avril Behan and Paul Doyle for our next session. So as I said, please go to the third tab and please enter into the polls and give us some of your feedback there. So next up is our session on digital transformation in the Irish construction sector, where we have our panel of Dr. Avril Behan and Paul Doyle. So Dr. Avril Behan is a chartered geomatics surveyor, I hope I have that right, and an active member of the geomatics professional group of the Society of Chartered Surveyors. She's a principal investigator at TU Dublin for Enterprise Ireland funded Construction Cluster Ireland, which is supporting construction and built environment SMEs to digitally transform as a means of improving productivity and increasing internationalization. So Avril lectures at the Faculty of Engineering and Built Environment at TU Dublin and is also a director of Lean Construction Ireland and led the development of a range of BIM, digital construction and construction analytics programs at TU Dublin. So looking to support the upskilling of professionals in digital adoption and process improvement. And joining Avril today will be Paul Doyle. He is a partner with Beta Digital, where he's an advocate and driver of business agility and successfully bridges the gap between technology capabilities and business benefit realization, leading organizations, process and IT change. So Paul thrives on creating value through organizational change with a background in strategic transformation across business functions, including organizations, operations, commercial, technology and finance. And Paul has led the strategic transformation programs and projects across sales, service, HR, operations finance in Ireland's leading telecommunications provider AIR, and is a member of the Change Management Institute in Ireland and a lecturer at the faculty member of the Institute of Banking. So there's a mouthful for everybody. So this session is going to cover the on-the-ground challenges and insights, best practices from an Irish perspective when it comes to implementing digital technologies. So welcome to you both, Avril and Paul, and let's get started. Avril, perhaps you might open things up for us.
Great, thank you. So, okay, if I share screen here, just 1 second till I grab the screen, and here we go. So, everyone able to see that okay? Yep, can you see that okay, yeah?
Yep, all good.
Great. Okay. So thank you to Kibana for the invitation to talk on this particular topic, because it is something that is extremely important to us from an education perspective in terms of making sure that the graduates that we from TU Dublin are putting out into the market, that they are actually ready for the changed environment. And it was interesting to hear Noel saying there about having to sometimes teach the students how to go back to say why it is that moving into the sector has such a change on it. So I suppose just in terms of giving a start point for where I started, sorry, just 1 second there. The geomatics surveyor. So for those of you who aren't aware of what a geomatics surveyor is, we're the people who normally stand on the side of the road with the tripods and the instruments. And when I started in TU Dublin, when it was formerly DIT, we were in an environment where it was all paper-based and it was optical instruments. And within a period of about 10 to 15 years, we as a sector had become entirely digitized in terms of the way that we collected data. So we produced maps, we produced three-dimensional models, etc. And it took a while for a lot of the rest of the construction sector, I suppose, to catch up with us. But on the right-hand side there on the screen, you can see a laser scanning instrument which has the capability of measuring millions of points per second. When you think about the scale of that, that's just absolutely phenomenal. But in terms of, I suppose, what Noel was saying as well about being pulled by technology, these technologies were pulling us forward, and we were moving, and our sector has moved a lot into those areas. And we've now got further drivers in terms of construction. And as Tracy said, I've looked after a lot of BIM digital construction courses. And the full construction sector now is moving towards things like design for assembly and disassembly, virtual and mixed reality worlds, the use of big data, AI, machine learning, and obviously moving towards a more manufacturing angle on construction, which is why partly actually it was very interesting that this session was called both construction and manufacturing, because really the two sectors are coming very closely together. So these are some of the drivers that Noel was referring to in terms of, you know, construction companies thinking that maybe that this is what they have to chase. These are the new areas that they have to move into in terms of being competitive. But additional to that, you have that there's also, I suppose, a new onus on construction organizations and on those of us who work across the built environment to actually really feed into the execution of, I suppose, bigger goals, feeding into society. And that would be in terms of things like helping to achieve the UN Sustainable Development Goals, feeding into the UN's or the EU's Green Deal, and making sure that we are actually minding this planet for the next generations that are actually moving forward. So trying to actually chase all those goals of moving forward with technology, using it to become you know, as productive as you possibly can, but also feeding into those greater societal needs. It means that we actually have to be very agile. Now, I'm not suggesting we all have to hang out of rocks like the character on the right-hand side there, but we do certainly need to be more responsive to our environments. And construction companies are having problems. We have that beautiful chameleon there shown on the screen, and as a classic example of something that has adapted to its environment. And if we have a lot of companies who've become very good at what they do, but the problem is sometimes when what they do changes, or when they need to change the environment in which they do it, for instance, moving to a new market, or where there's a change in regulation, how are they actually able to make that particular change? So you've got this situation for organizations and for the individuals in it of trying to balance between being agile, responding to the new information and the new needs, while at the same time also meeting their financial requirements, governance, following building codes, all of these other things. And it can be quite a difficult problem to do. And it's particularly difficult in an environment where you don't feel like you're necessarily in control and piloting the vehicle that you're in. So I think what low-code environments and no-code environments do is they give an opportunity for companies to take control back in terms of the processes and the software and the systems that they use. So a lot of us in construction will be very familiar with the changes being driven by, let's say, the next release of software. Something has happened, there's a new release of software, and now the software tool is able to do X, Y, or Z. Or there's a release coming down the line and we had anticipated it to be able to do something, but it's still not, so therefore you can't change your business process to go with it. So what we need to do, or what would be best, is if companies are actually able to take back control from these, I suppose, the larger software providers, because at the moment sometimes you will have organizations who are using pieces of software simply because they're the ones that integrate best together, as opposed to them being the best tools for the job at a particular time. And that's what low code and no code allows you to do, is to connect data or information between different systems. So, as Tracy said, I'm a director in Lean Construction Ireland, and one of the things that we're advocating for a lot is use of, for instance, the last planner system, which is a really simple set of tools which allows your end users to get into the processes and say, this is what I need, when I need it, how I need it. And they get to talk to the other people who are part of that process. And it really is very simple. It's writing things down on post-it notes. It's people standing beside each other in a room and moving the post-it notes around until they find a process that works. Going to what's called the Gemba, the actual field site, and then trying it out. If it doesn't work, improving it, changing it again. We need to be able to do that in digital environments as well. And it's interesting that it was mentioned that when Tracy said apps, this is all about connecting your apps. One of my first, I suppose, encounters with this was in relation to a tool called the MIT App Inventor, which is actually a little software tool that allows you to create apps that can run on Android. And I use this with some of our first year students in college. We've always had a situation with students coming through engineering and built environment courses where there's a percentage of the students who love the coding and the computer related items, and there are other people who just can't get it. It doesn't work. And what we wanted to do was to show everyone that it's actually possible to do this and there's huge benefits. So we had groups of students coming in on their induction day. So the first day they arrived with us, they came in, they used this particular tool, and they created an app on their phone and were able to walk home and show their siblings, show their parents, I have actually created an app. Now, it was a picture of a cat that when you touched it, it meowed, but it still showed the principle of what it's able to do. And I think it's this taking the fear away from development and being able to make changes that's really important. So just in terms of, I suppose, the benefits that I would see around no code and low code is that it really improves user responsiveness. You're able to ask the people at the code phase what it is they need. You can create your rapid prototypes, see whether it works, and come back and change and adjust. And as I said, from a lean construction point of view, where we're very much in favor of plan, do, check, act, this really is responsiveness on a very large scale. So just in terms of, I suppose, a key takeaway from this, maybe this idea of going towards no code or low code, stepping away from the security blanket of we buy a piece of software from a particular provider, they're the market leader. That can look like you're about to climb a really high set of stairs. I just suggest start small, take a baby step, take a small project. Some little process is not working for you. Try it out in a low code environment, and really the returns on it will be very fast and very excellent. And I look forward to taking any questions and a bit further discussion with Tracy. Thanks.
Thank you, Alison. There was a lot there to take in, so thank you very much for that. It was interesting there how you highlighted maybe fear, and maybe it's often cited that the reluctance of some groups or participants in construction and supply chains and processes, they impede the ability of the sector to digitally transform. Do you think that this is true, and do you think that there's a way that we can overcome this?
Yeah, I think it's absolutely true, Tracy. There's particularly when you're dealing with let's say site workers, or what we would sometimes call the blue collar or even the no collar workers. So this is actually the reason why we in TU Dublin became involved in a European project called BIMCert, which allowed us to develop just-in-time training that would be delivered through a really low-tech platform, very similar to what we're actually doing here. And it allowed construction workers to learn about energy performance requirements and how their behaviours on construction sites would actually impinge on achieving energy targets. And initially, I suppose, when we were thinking about the people we were working with, we said, well, they might be a little bit afraid, they might be a little bit worried about the digital environment. But really, it was very much a case of we started off with actually some digital skills training. And it was really to show the construction workers and their management teams, because that's actually important as well. The management teams sometimes were afraid that people wouldn't do it. And it's simply a case of holding people's hands through the first couple of steps and say, right, this is no more difficult than, voting for something on a TV game show, or placing a bet online. And we were able to break down the barriers very quickly by simply providing small amounts of support, and also letting people see that you take a small step at first. Don't try and change your entire business. Pick one small little process, take a little pilot project, go for it there, see how it works, and then iterate around it.
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. I couldn't agree with you more, Avril. Thank you so much for that. And maybe, Paul, could I ask you the same question regarding your thoughts on change management and maybe the reluctance of some groups to implement these technologies?
Yeah, thanks, Tracy. As a nice segue into what I want to talk about a little bit today. But certainly, and I can totally relate to what Avril is talking about. My background is in telecommunications, but engineering. So, ran construction, and I'm involved in an organization today that's constructing telecommunications network. And you see the same challenges, particularly with those blue collar, no collar workers, as you say, Avril. And sometimes those problems are of adoption. Maybe I'll just share my screen and take you through a little bit of what I want to say. Bear with me. Hopefully you can all see that. Oops. Okay, can you see that? Yeah.
Yeah.
Sorry, I'm having a bit of the yips here. Sorry. So I mean, look, one of the things I will say here is my experience is, even no code requires people to change. So digital doesn't remove people from the equation. People are still required. And no code doesn't remove the need for you to get people to change. And that concept of adoption is key. So, as Tracy also said, I'm involved with the Change Management Institute in Ireland. And one of the things we promote is change and the management of change, and how important that is. And we use this as a kind of an introduction to people, just this concept of, if people don't understand what's in it for them, why they're required to change, they won't. So we use this funny graphic of the Stone Age rather than taking it up to the modern age. But it still applies today. Quite often people are too busy to accept the change, to see the value to them. So why is that? Well, that's a problem that is a management problem as such. So from the point of view of how I would put it is that, embedding change is a management challenge. It's a challenge for us to make sure that people do that. In Beta Digital, we often work with organizations, and very interested to see Noel as well show that golden triangle of people, process, and technology. We quite often find that people focus very much on the changing of the technology. And the great thing about no-code development like Kibana is that it gives you the ability to change your technology at pace. But if you don't get your people to keep pace with that, you're going to run into a problem. So that's a real challenge. So I'm not going to step through this slide in detail, but it's just this concept of, have you thought through the emotional, procedural, and structural issues? So some of the things that we would talk to people about is, have you changed how people work? But have you removed access to old ways of working? Because people are quite sticky around that, and they get very emotional rather than logical about how they do things. They stick with the trusted versus the new, because that's how we do things around here. And that fear of change is, it's in everybody, but it's stronger in some than in others. And what we really talk about is the need to drive those new behaviors and how you should drive those new behaviors. Formal and informal approach. So it's not about change management is not merely about the formal. It's a little bit of the carrot, a little bit of the stick, but it's also a little bit about talking to people. And then it's about making sure that the practices and the habits change, because there's a great ability to get and to use low-code and no-code solutions to tie together some of your big, old, lumpy legacy systems to make them flexible for the modern world, where the challenges in construction are around health and safety and quality and validating what work is done on a regular basis. All those challenges are not met easily with trying to drive big change into big old systems. So low code and no code can build those. But I mean, I've seen people build very effective low code solutions, but when they try to implement them, they don't work because they haven't properly engaged. So from a people aspect point of this, coming back towards Noel's point, I mean, really effective communications is at the core of change management. Really critical in terms of getting that right. So what we mean by that? Well, two-way communication is a fundamental of what you're trying to do. Listening as well as speaking. Prioritizing face-to-face if you can. Or at least getting people onto calls where you can actually send them the right message and see their reaction to that message. I think sometimes sending out an edict is not good. All managers should communicate, and as such, all managers should be on the right message. Bad news and good. Don't hide the bad news if there's bad news involved in the change or if there's difficulty involved in it. If you have access to the right expertise to help you with the communications and to help you with the change, use that expertise. Create champions of change. And one of the great things about the concept of no code and citizen development is you can automatically create champions as you move forward, where if you've got somebody within the organization who has this capability, they immediately become a champion because they're building it with you or building it for you. That's a really, really big advantage of the no code, low code environment. You absolutely have to address the what, the why, and the how. Very, very important in terms of making sure that you're letting people know why and how, and not just telling them what. So when we look at this, change is a journey, and the effective communications within change is a journey. It's not announce and let it fly. You really, really need to hold firm and work your way through the process of keeping people informed as you go. It's that old Irish saying of, a good start is half the work, but it's still only half the work. You still have to do the other half, which is about keeping people informed through the change. And as I said, that two-way communication is critical.
Thank you, Paul. Thank you very much for that. I love that, the champions of change, and change is a journey. So yeah, I like that very much. I might rob that for the future. Just to ask you one question there, you've gone through quite a lot there, but where do you see are the main advantages for these industries? Why do you think that they should be, actively implementing no code, and should they be doing it now?
Well, for me, if they're not at least looking at the use of it or the potential use of it into the future, they're absolutely missing a trick. I think I've referred to this as well. A lot of these systems a lot of these organizations are living off legacy systems, and waiting for the next big release or waiting for that system to change can often delay what they need to do. And there's no need to do that with open APIs and simple low code and no code solutions out there for people to build. And the reality of it is, quite often the people working for you on the ground are the people who know the best solutions to the problems. So if you can match those two things together with citizen development and get it right, you automatically build that change champion, as I said. There's a quid pro quo to that. You don't want the whole of your organization running off, deciding to become a citizen developer. So you've got to govern and get the right leadership and capabilities around that. And that's really important. Otherwise, you'll end up with a whole mess of lots of different solutions. But it is something that, is very, very powerful. And I've seen it in action in construction, in telecommunications instruction, where simple things like quality checks, volumes delivered per day checks are done on simple apps, very much like Avril said, push a button. And, when you've got a guy or a girl out in the field in a distance well away from you, and you need to know what they've done today or what they're doing today, or you need them to say they've completed their health and safety checks today, you need that strong governance. Giving them some sort of tablet with a simple app on it that they just push buttons on means you get very, very high levels of compliance, but you get really, really rich information as well, which is difficult to get when you're getting them to fill in paper forms and send them in at the end of the month. So I think construction manufacturing is absolutely a target-rich environment for low-code, no-code development.
Yeah, thank you for that. And I guess that brings us kind of nicely into, it wraps up into the whole purpose behind digitalization for the industry, getting that, not just getting more data, but getting clean data and putting it back into the hands of the people who really know what it is that they're looking to achieve with that data. Avril, if I could ask very briefly that same question to you, if you have, and I'll leave the last word to you then. I could talk to you both all day on this, so we might end up bringing you back again. But Avril, would you add to that there as a final word?
Yeah, I mean, I suppose I just have to agree completely with what Paul said. I think some of the routes into this are things that actually are maybe compliance driven. So around, Paul mentioned quality, health and safety, etc. And it really is a case of once you empower people to do these or to use simple apps and whatever it is, they will actually ask for more of them. And I think that's something that we have found. So slightly away from construction, but maybe more purely in the education side, we, as everyone did, we did the overnight pivot when COVID came, and people started to develop apps and they started to develop things for approvals, etc. And now we've got, as Paul referred to, we've a host of things floating around, and we don't have them connected and we don't have them governed. So I suppose a note of caution. You want to let people have kind of a sandbox to play in, but then at some point you do need to actually put a structure on top of it, and I think that's where there are, going to Noel's point of the human aspect of it, you do need to then say, okay, it's great that you want to do this, now let's see how we do it actually properly and join together things in a more structured and defined way. But I think the opportunity across construction and manufacturing really is huge.
Okay, thank you both very much for your time. Avril, thank you very much for that. We're just popping up another poll question there. How likely are you to be looking to adopt or buy new solutions to help you with your digital transformation? So a timely question there, looking at yet to explore, not sure, etc., etc., and some responses back in there already. So it leads us on to our next session, and really looking forward to this. And I think on the back of our previous conversations with Noel and Avril and Paul, it might help to further explain and help to guide people in terms of how you can actually implement these no-code technologies. So we have a Kibana case study with the ArdMac group. We have welcoming back Osvaldo Souza as a no-code and low-code expert, and also the CEO and co-founder of the no-code business process automation Kibana Technologies. Osvaldo brings over 2 decades of experience with him and is definitely considered a subject matter expert in digital transformation and low-code, no-code technology. And I'm joining Osvaldo here today will be Chris Fitzpatrick. He is the Technology and Innovation Manager, leading digital transformation expert at the construction company ArdMac, and has been collaborating with Kibana on a recent project as well. So he brings with him over 10 years of experience in management roles and a passion for building relationships and leveraging technology to deliver the organization's strategic goals. So today we're going to be going through how ArdMac leveraged Kibana's no-code platform in this fireside chat between Osvaldo and Chris, and including a real-life overview perhaps of the platform. So let me get started here today and just say, Osvaldo, we've heard a lot today about no-code and the term citizen developer. Why do you think that we're seeing the rise of the citizen developer now?
Tracy, I think it is important that we do put this a bit into a context. I will step back, and I know that this is something that in the minds of managers or even decision makers, this is something that they may think, oh, look, this is something that's new, it's just a fad, will go away, and we will just go on with what we have to do. That's a fear. But I think it's important to remember that this technology is not new. In fact, has been around for a long time. So this is maturing, becoming more accessible. So now we can build systems really quickly. A web application that you need for processing a high amount of data can be spun out very quickly and made available to all of the employees almost overnight. So this is really what low-code and no-code technologies enabling. So the technology advancement is really powerful, has come a long way. So everyone knows about access databases and all of the things that champions, people that were in those businesses that will go in and say, okay, I need a quick solution to manage that problem. And they go on and put something together, but then that their need quickly outgrows what they have built there. So with the advancement of low-code solutions, we are now in position to build robust, standard-following solutions without having to write code. In fact, writing code to build a solution that you can build it with no code could be a major mistake, because you would end up following the trap of many years of experience that were put together before and by people that had made mistakes before you. So it is really important.
Yeah, thank you, Osvaldo. And I guess that leads us nicely into my next question. In terms of our audience here today, and those especially from construction, manufacturing, and the engineering organizations who are not traditionally tech companies, how do you see these organizations actually getting started? Is it the big bite approach, or is it a phased approach?
Yeah, and this, what you said there, Tracy, is really important. I remember someone saying to me, look, we are not a tech, well, I'm not going to hire a developer. And that's really important. What we are looking to get from these organizations is that they leverage their knowledge. So we are specialized in technology. Our business is to produce technology so that people in organizations like Armac that know what they need to do, they know what problems they need to solve, can quickly and in small bites go in and solve in an iterative manner problems that they want to solve. So the answer really here is a bite-sized approach or a phased approach. So this sometimes can cause the fear of losing control on technology, but in fact it enables better collaboration, enables sometimes right now, even because we are now working remotely, better retention, because someone that has to manually print or fill in lots of paperwork manually might be a bit more less engaged with their work. While if we give that individual the tool for them to quickly digitalize that interaction, build an interface, rapid development type of approach in a small chunk, they would most likely be much more engaged with what they do. They would have the ownership in terms of digitalization.
Yeah, thank you, Osvaldo. And I think it leads nicely on from what Paul and Avril were talking about there in terms of the adoption and the governance and the compliance there as well too, and keeping the guardrails up by looking at that bite-sized approach and that modular approach. So I'm just going to invite Chris in here if you want to unmute yourself there, Chris, and maybe you can set the scene and give us a little bit of an overview of you and your company background.
Thanks, Tracy, and thanks, Osvaldo, for having me. So I've been working for Ardmac for nearly 5 years now. Ardmac are a specialist contractor, and we've been going for over 40 years. We're headquartered in Dublin, and we work across projects in the data centre, pharma, and interior fit-out projects across Ireland, the UK, and in Europe as well. In the last 12 months, we've also brought on a modular business, and we're starting to explore what that looks like for Ardmac, and it brings us into the manufacturing sector as well, which kind of ties in nicely what we're talking about here. So we're really excited about how that's going to develop over the next kind of few years. In terms of the size of the opportunity of some of the modular projects, it's really set to be a game changer for companies like ourselves and other companies and the sector in general. I suppose my role in ArdMac really, it's about leading the digital transformation of the business. We've talked a lot about people, process, and technology. I suppose what I'm trying to do is optimize those things, and ensuring that they're digital and that they're working well across all of our projects. Some of our project teams are what we've seen really is some of our project teams are really digital native, and they just get it, they just buy into it, they just get on with it. And some of our project teams are, they're not that digital kind of native people. And I suppose a big part of my role is making sure that the performance on our projects is the same on both. So maybe you need to give one team a little bit more support and a little bit more help. But that's a big part of my role is bringing along maybe the people who aren't bought into this type of stuff as the native guys.
Yeah.
The thing about my role is just getting to experience new technologies and rolling them out across the company. And as you kind of walk around and you visit sites and you kind of see these tools and platforms up on people's screens and they're using them and they're getting stuck into them, it really gives me a lot of job satisfaction.
Oh, that's great. That's great. And thank you, Chris, for that overview. It's really after setting the tone for us there. So you've mentioned there that you've already taken the plunge and you've embraced no-code citizen development. Can I ask you, what made you choose Kianda as your platform of choice?
Yeah, we had a very specific requirement when we were first speaking with Osvaldo and Daria. What we've done and kind of what some of the other guys were touching on, we've a couple of core platforms across the business. So we've ERP, we have operation and collaboration platforms, we've HR platforms, that type of stuff. What we'd end up doing is speaking to these kind of large software developers, and we would say, okay, we have a need to do, your process does 90% of what we need, but how do we get it to do the final 10%? And they'd come back with, big long requirements documents. They'd come along with, we've need lots of time here and lots of business analysts and all that type of stuff. We had a very specific requirement. It was causing us a lot of problems in terms of one of our platforms. We'd had conversations with the software vendor. We'd had conversations with kind of independent developers. And then we had seen Kianda come up and some work they had done with some of the other guys in the sector, and it seemed like a good fit. We met with Osvaldo and Daria, and I suppose they're probably a little bit smaller then than they are now. But their passion and their how quickly they could solve that problem for us really came across. Again, it was the bite-sized thing. We weren't committed to a huge development or anything up front. It was a contract and a small piece of work behind that then, and it's worked out really well for us.
Yeah, that's great. Definitely the bite-size approach is really valuable kind of starting point. Can you tell me a little bit more? I suppose let's dive a little deeper and tell me what has been the most successful part of working with Kianda.
Yeah, absolutely. For us to date, it's really been around connecting the platforms that we have. So we have a couple of big platforms. We've Microsoft Dynamics, we've Procore, we've kind of other maybe smaller tools, and a lot of companies I think would have Procore and those type of platforms or their own version of them. And like I say, there were silos. So we've lots of information, lots of processes going on in our ERP environment. We've lots of information and whatever else going on in our collaboration environment. How do we join them up? And if an activity happens in, a certain platform, how do we make sure that information gets replicated across that? That's where we see platforms like Kianda really adding value for us. It gives us the flexibility to go and do things ourselves. Again, you speak to these developers and you speak to these types of companies. Generally, they have their own roadmap of stuff that they want to do. If it's a single client asking them for a small requirement, it can be quite tough to get onto that roadmap. Inevitably, there'll be a PO required at some stage, and you kind of generally have to wait for it. Where what a platform like Kianda lets us do is get stuck in ourselves, to try and connect the bits and pieces. We get lots of support from the guys as well when we need it, and to be able to do things as we need it. Where we see it kind of developing on the back of that then is moving more into the apps world now, and maybe moving away from that kind of connectivity facilitation piece, and to be able to develop our own kind of bespoke apps and kind of ArdMac apps and that type of stuff. rather than, again, going to kind of app developers and that type of stuff. And then really, again, back to the people, process, technology. For us, we're not going to hire developers. As Valdo touched on that, we're not set up for them. We're not a tech company. And all of the people we understand that. So being able to kind of use platforms like this just means we can use the resources we have effectively. We can put them on business challenges and get them added value to the business, and in terms of people's own career and development, to be able to work across our business at a level, as opposed to hiding away in an IT department, producing documentation or producing code that ultimately, I think it was Noel touched on that 70% of these types of projects fail. We can kind of weed a lot of that stuff out earlier in the process.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's great, and definitely being able to see, how a flexible platform like Kibana can enable you to be, that bit more agile and lean in terms of your operations is fantastic. I guess, leaning back, to what the guys were talking about previously, what would you say have been the challenges you've had in adopting this new technology into your environment? And perhaps you can bring Osvaldo in on this too.
Yeah, it's kind of what the previous speakers were touching on. The technology we find is generally thereabouts. The processes are kind of, you're taking an existing process, like certainly in Ardmac or a company like Ardmac, a lot of our processes have been around for a long time. They were probably paper-based or, that sort of thing, and we kind of moved them onto a digital platform. And what we found in some cases was we produced these really good digital processes, and we sent lots of iPads and tablets and all that stuff to the field. Sorry there, my light took off. Give me 2 seconds.
These things happen, don't they?
I don't control the lights, but
No.
we're all about sustainability. But so what we had found was that we designed these really good processes, and then we sent out all these tablets into the field, and they just sat on people's bags. It's really about the people. All the stuff, the change champions that the previous speakers touched on, getting that stuff right, identifying these people up front has been the absolute the difference between success and failure for us. Yeah. I don't know, Osvaldo, if you've seen that, in other organizations and other sectors.
That is absolutely, it's exactly the kind of scenario. We call that sometimes the adoption or the change management. But in fact, what ends up happening usually is there is the users, the champions that actually are the ones that are the one pushing forward the process, and they are brought later on in the process to be delivered a new digital process, and they say, hang on a minute, I actually don't, this is not how I do it. And this is where sometimes most of those failures come from. Having the ability to involve those users, extract knowledge early on, have the ability for them to be involved in producing those digital solutions will facilitate a lot the adoption, because they are the ones that are influencing and driving forward that digitalization.
Yeah, definitely. And I know that you've mentioned there, Chris, having platforms that are front and center, but using Kibana in the background as an orchestrator and a collaboration tool has been another element that you've been bringing forward as well too. And Osvaldo, to your point as well, bringing in people at the beginning of the conversation can help with that adoption and making sure that then you have a faster implementation and a faster adoption rate, I suppose, is to that point. So thank you guys, and thank you Osvaldo for that detail. Osvaldo, I guess from reading some of the questions that have been coming in there in the background, it's great to talk about the concept and the digitalization strategies, the terms no code and citizen developer. sometimes it can all sound too big and a little overwhelming.
Absolutely.
And I know it wasn't until I saw it in action that I could see how easy it was and how easy it was to come up with these ideas. You've mentioned some examples there. Do you think maybe you could show us very briefly what it looks like in action?
Certainly, Tracy. I'm going to share my screen now. So what I'm going to do is really quickly go through one particular digital application or workspace that we put together. It's a demo system, in fact, that we cover different areas. And because we are talking about manufacturing construction, would be good to cover at least quality, which is a hot topic in those industries. So in this application, this is one of the application workspaces that I personally run myself. What we do have is a placeholder where you can effectively allow users to it's drag and drop, so you would be able to create the applications or systems based without having to make write code. That's really what this is about. If I go into one of these applications, so this is the quality area where you would have a few of those applications. They are pre-built applications or templates that we make available to any customers to make use, where they would be able to filter all of the quality related items or processes in one central dashboard that will go from inspections to non-conformance report to maintenance requests, reactive and preventive maintenance, to incident report and corrective action plan. So this is just a good example, central solution where end users will actually be able to, if I wanted to go in and push something related to an inspection that I would be able to schedule for someone, I would then be able to start that inspection, record, select what kind of checklist I might want to be adding. So what you are seeing is a view from the end user. If you are looking to understand how you put that together, that would be a key question here. This is really easy to follow. You would effectively be able to drag and drop, edit the components that you see here and make the application work. So in this case, in this sample checklist type of application, what you are seeing here is ability for you to capture this checklist, add media, create actions related to the questions or the topics that you are going to allow users to report on from a checklist point of view. Now, this applies to many other areas. So in this demo environment, I have here on the left side several different sample other applications that cover HR, that cover finance, that cover just generic approvals such as document approvals, and they are really good examples or samples that we provide to any customer of applications that allow them to have a good idea of what they can achieve with something like Yanda. Okay, so I'm going to stop sharing because there is really tons that we talk about here, and then go back into.
Absolutely. Osvaldo, thank you for that. And I know we could stay showing instances after instances in terms of how it could be used, but I absolutely invite anybody to contact us. And I know that anybody in Team Kianda would only be too happy to give people a flick through and look at any particular use cases that they have for themselves. So again, thank you for that. Chris, if I could just pop back to you maybe finally and just ask you, what do you see as the next steps? Where do you see no code working best for you in the future?
Yeah, it's for us really. It's kind of further developing our own custom workflows, and I suppose, like I say, we have a couple of kind of really core platforms. It's making those platforms really smart for us and work really well for us, and make sure they're working, as digitally as they can, and we're not having to duplicate work, or we're not having to, move data from A to B, that type of stuff. We're looking at doing kind of some safety first apps, and again, another kind of app around project performance. And I suppose we developed, like, off the back of platforms like Kibana and the other platforms that we have, we've been able to develop a kind of a whole working smart proposition with kind of 3 strategic goals, which are across our business, which is around empowering our people, driving performance on our projects, and delighting our clients. And Kibana is ultimately going to pull all that stuff together for us across all of those platforms, and that's where we want to get to over the next year. So it's probably a year of consolidation for us, and making sure that we're kind of continuing to work smart and to continue to, I suppose, deliver those goals to the business.
That's great. That's fantastic. And I suppose looking to see how you have changes in the conversations, and how you're looking to go from technology, I suppose, to people first, and how Kibana is helping you to enable that conversation is great to see. So thank you, Chris, for that. We've covered a lot today, Osvaldo. I know we're really tight on time and we're gone over. So if briefly I could ask you to offer up one key takeaway from the session, what would you say to those that are thinking about accelerating their digitization activities? What would it be?
So I think the first thing is start looking at investigating how citizen development might be the catalyst to help you accelerate digital transformation. I think this is the first step really for you to, the first key takeaway, because as I said at the beginning, sometimes maybe a mix between change and fear of change, but this is empowering the business owners, empowering the organizations to become more agile and innovative.
Thank you, Osvaldo. Yeah, certainly, I definitely agree with you there. I'm going to rush on and go to our next session. So, Osvaldo and Chris, thank you very much for your time. And we're going to move on there to our next session, which is driving transparency in the construction sector by leveraging digital tools. And I'm going to introduce here Gary Seth, who is the Chief Improvement Officer at Comfort Engineers, a digitized MEP contracting company that specializes in project design, management and execution. She's over 12 years of experience in the construction space, skilled in human resource management, governance, management and communication, and has a strong professional background with the Management Development Institute, as well as a bachelor's degree in economics from the Delhi University. So Gary, welcome, and I'm going to hand over to you there and let you introduce your session.
Thank you so much, Tracy. Good evening. Thank you so much to everyone at Kibana for inviting me to this event. It's been great listening to all the other speakers, and I do understand it's the last session, so I'm going to keep it really short and sweet. I'm just going to share my presentation. Just give me a second here. Okay, so I'm going to talk about driving transparency in construction by leveraging digital tools. Technology is central in how we live. It enables me to sit in my home in New Delhi and share my views with people across the globe on platforms such as these. Recently, we've witnessed how technology enabled the world to continue to function in the new normal as pandemic created havoc in the physical environment. Now, there is no denying that technology... Sorry for that, one second. So there's no denying technology enables individuals and businesses to either make incremental improvements or to completely transform the way they function. Before I talk about construction, I'll just look at some of the other industries that were completely revolutionized by technology. Retail, cab services, logistics, to name a few. Now, digitization came into retail long ago with billing management, inventory management, etc. But when it became customer facing, That is when, with e-commerce, that is when everything changed. By making the tech available to the customers with process and price clarity, these industries were able to create a revolution of sorts. Now, customer may have switched to an Amazon or an Uber initially for the price advantage, but no more. These companies thrive today as their tech is their competitive advantage. The convenience and clarity has made the customer stick. And not just that, they have been able to expand the market altogether by reaching out to people who were non-users before. If I were to take my own example, while in New Delhi, I would never think of taking a cab. But Uber was so convenient, and the availability of real-time information made me switch to Uber vis-a-vis using my own vehicle on many occasions. Now, coming to construction. A typical construction project runs anywhere between 8 to 12 months, and it involves the active participation of the client, the architect, the project management consultant, the design consultant, the various contractors, the civil contractor, HVAC contractor, electrical, plumbing, the various material suppliers, and the service providers. And now all of these stakeholders are going to be interacting with each other over innumerable times over phone calls, WhatsApps, emails. They will share spreadsheets, technical data sheets, catalogs. There will be site visits, negotiations, inspections. And what do you think would be the end result of all of that? A typical scenario is where to the client, the details of the material selected are not available. The project progress is very, very difficult to track. There is miscommunication, dependence on a few key people, and because of the lack of construction technology, the dependence is often for those people to be physically present. There is no coordination or a lack of coordination, and the result is chaos and conflict. Now, His Holiness, the Dalai Lama, had expressed that the lack of transparency results in distrust and a deep sense of insecurity. And this can be witnessed in any construction project, where the various stakeholders are withholding information. While the availability of data leads to trust and hence faster decision making, the unavailability of data leads to the complete opposite, and hence there are project delays and cost overruns. The only way the construction industry can grow is by making information flow between stakeholders without friction. When meaningful data will flow freely between all of these stakeholders, we will witness better decision making, an increase in productivity, competitive advantage while estimating and bidding for projects, a boost in worker productivity, and a greater cooperation, which will eventually result in projects being completed on budget and in time, and better and improved profit margins. Now, for this data to be meaningful, it is imperative that the entire journey, right from the start, is happening on the same platform. Right from project planning to material selection, procurement to delivery, construction, assembly, and installation. All of the information has to be captured on the same platform, and that platform has to be available to each and every stakeholder. I'm going to go back to the previous slide. So, technology needs to bind all of these stakeholders together, wherein right from the design part to the project management, everyone has, and all the teams of the contractor have access to the same platform, where RFQs and POs from the contractor side are going to the material supplier, and on the same platform, we are receiving the quotations, the TDS, the catalogs, the bills, so that there is transparency with respect to selections, with respect to costs, with respect to even where our material statuses are, whether it's been selected, ordered, indented, delivered, or installed. Innovation and technology are not options any longer. Either you get on the wagon or you'll miss the train. To adapt will be to succeed, and to fall behind will be to get away from competition. Thank you. Tracy, are there any questions?
Gary, thank you for that. That was really insightful, so thank you very much. You mentioned a lack of transparency and distrust as key messages there, and you see transparency as the way forward, and that it's time to embrace the information flow. So how do you see no code enabling this?
So construction is typically very labor intensive. And for most parties, the cost of material and the cost of labor is increasing and not in their control. So for them to opt for technology becomes an increased cost, not just to buy the technology, but to implement it. And no code, I feel, is it's a more economical alternative, and it will bring in efficiency. So while people think it's going to be an added cost, it's a lesser cost if we were to compare it with other technologies. And additionally, the improved coordination will definitely lead to increase in profit margins. So I definitely feel that no code is going to contribute to even smaller contractors that way.
Yeah, fantastic. Thank you very much for that. And I suppose with a final word there, if you were to close off with one key takeaway for people today that are curious about no code and maybe new to it, especially for the construction and manufacturing industry, what would you offer as a key takeaway for people today?
I just feel that if you've been starving for a very long time and you finally, no code is giving you a 3-course meal, to choose to starve indefinitely is not a very wise option. You might as well take that rather than saying, no, I will only come on the table the day the 7 course is served.
Yeah, I definitely like the 3-course option rather than starve. Gary, thank you so much for your time and for your presentation. It was really insightful. Thank you very much for that. I'm just going to say thank you again to all of our speakers, and my apologies for running over on time there today, and to our audience and for their participation as well too today. I hope you have all found it to be both educational and insightful, and that you'll feel open to giving no-code technology such as Kibana a trial. So I'd like to bring Osvaldo back in here for some final thoughts on the day. And while we're waiting for Osvaldo to pop back in there, we have a poll up here, and always looking for feedback and looking to improve. So if you could give us some feedback there on the content of today, I'd greatly appreciate it. So Osvaldo, your final thoughts.
Thank you so much, Tracy. So I will try not to hold you too long. I know that the session has run over a bit. I will keep it short so that we can all go back to my cup of tea. First of all, thank you so much for the speakers. Great sessions, really insightful, really good content. And thank you for Tracy, for yourself, and Andreen for organizing the session today. And I will again invite you, if you didn't do yet, to contact anyone from the team if you have any questions, or if you want to even explore a bit more how the application or the platform looks like.
Yeah, and I think we've a message popped up there. So absolutely feel free to reach out to any of the team. We'll send out some information to everybody afterwards. But to close, just to say thank you, Osvaldo. Congratulations again on the recent announcement. We're all very excited about that. And absolutely thank you to everybody for their participation today. So with that, we'll close and say good evening, and thank you all very much.
Thank you.
Thank you all. Goodbye.